In the spring of 1998, in a quiet backyard of a small Oregon town, 6-year-old Emma Whitmore played beneath the gentle sun, her blonde curls catching the breeze as she skipped through dandelions. Inside, her mother, Sarah, folded laundry with half an ear tuned to the laughter floating in from outside. It was a sound that had always made her feel safe, until the moment it stopped. When she looked out the window minutes later, the yard was empty. No sign of Emma. Not even a single footprint in the grass. The silence that followed would stretch into 3 agonizing years. Sarah learned to survive within that silence. She kept Emma's room the same, lined the kitchen corkboard with missing child posters, and answered every unknown call with a breathless hope that never lasted. Still, she moved forward, her life a fragile dance of routine and denial. On a humid morning, almost 3 years to the day since Emma vanished, she stood at her kitchen counter cracking eggs into a bowl. The soft whisking of yolks was the only sound in the house, a sound she'd come to resent for its emptiness. Emma used to wake first, bursting into the kitchen wearing pajamas and dreams, insisting on pancakes shaped like animals. "Butterflies today, Mama," she would say, dragging her tiny chair to the counter. But this morning, it was only the eggs, only the silence. Then the phone rang. Startled, Sarah checked the clock. 7:23 a.m. It was too early for anything casual. Her fingers hovered over the receiver before she picked up. The voice on the other end was calm but somber. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Detective Carl Morrison from the Pine Ridge Police Department. I'm sorry to call so early, but we need you to come down to Blackwater Swamp." Her breath caught. The name alone was enough to curdle her stomach. Blackwater Swamp lay 15 miles beyond the town, a place of tangled roots and shadowed marshes avoided by most locals. "Why?" she whispered. "There's been some discovery. Our cleanup volunteers found something while clearing flood debris. We believe it could be related to Emma's case." The bowl slipped from her hand, egg yolks splattering across the linoleum. Her voice cracked. "You found her?" A pause. "We found remains, small ones. I'd prefer not to say more on the phone, but we need you to identify a few items." Her knees gave out. She sank onto the kitchen stool, her knuckles white on the countertop. Years of waiting, of aching, of imagining the worst. All of it condensed into that one moment. She choked out, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Morrison's voice softened. "This won't be easy. Do you have someone who can drive you?" "No," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I'll manage." When the call ended, Sarah remained frozen in place. Egg dripped down the cabinet, unnoticed. She moved on instinct, pulling open a drawer where she kept a manila folder marked Emma. Inside were copies of police reports, hand-drawn maps, newspaper articles now yellowed with time. Her fingers shook as she grabbed her keys from the hook by the door. The drive to Blackwater Swamp felt eternal. Familiar town streets gave way to long stretches of pine-bordered highway, then to a narrow, winding road damp with mist and memory. Sarah had only taken this road once before, during those first frantic weeks when helicopters combed the skies and search dogs scoured every trail. Her heart pounded harder the closer she got. At the swamp's edge, flashing police lights strobed through the morning haze. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze. Uniformed officers and forensic teams worked with silent purpose near the water. Sarah parked behind a van marked Forensics and sat motionless, staring through the windshield, summoning the courage to open the door. Detective Morrison, a tall man with tired eyes and graying hair, approached. He'd been with the case from the beginning. She opened the door slowly. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice low. "Are you ready?" "No," she answered honestly. "But I'm here." He offered a steadying hand on her elbow and led her toward the taped perimeter. The rains washed away years of sediment. A volunteer spotted it buried in the mud, an old oven, vintage, From the 60s. An oven. Her mind refused to register the word. It made no sense. They stopped beside a blue tarp where a rusted red enamel appliance sat like a grotesque relic. The door had been sealed with layers of industrial adhesive. Morrison's voice wavered as he gestured to a nearby evidence table. Inside, we found remains, bones, small, arranged in order, and other things. Sarah moved closer. Clear evidence bags lay in neat rows. Her gaze fell on scorched fabric, deep burgundy velvet with delicate white lace. The trim was familiar. The collar of Emma's favorite dress, her princess dress. The one she'd worn to her 6th birthday, the one she begged to wear to bed. A whisper escaped her lips. "No!" Then louder, "No!" Her scream tore through the swamp, raw and primal. She collapsed onto the muddy ground, her hands clawing at the earth, grief erupting like a broken dam. Morrison knelt beside her, his own eyes glistening. Around them, the forensics team paused, granting her space. The swamp held its breath. Only the distant caw of a bird broke the silence, a cruel reminder that life moved on. Then came a voice, familiar, fragile. "Sarah. Oh God, Sarah." She looked up to see Mark Whitmore pushing past the tape. Her ex-husband's face twisted in anguish as he dropped to his knees beside her. He still wore his red work vest from Whitmore's Hardware, a smear of paint on the chest. He pulled her into his arms without hesitation. For a moment, divorce didn't exist. Only their daughter did. "We'll get through this," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Just like we always promised we would. For Emma." Sarah didn't resist. She let herself fold into him, her sobs shaking them both. He smelled like sawdust and black coffee, the scent of a life that once felt whole. Detective Morrison gave them time before gently approaching. "We'll need to run DNA tests to confirm, but given the size of the remains and the dress, it's very likely Emma." Mark's arm tightened around Sarah. "How long until we know for sure?" 72 hours for initial results. Longer for a full forensic report. Sarah felt like she was floating above her own body. Nothing seemed real. Mark helped her stand, his arm steadying her. "We should look through her case files again," he said, addressing both Sarah and Morrison. "Maybe something we missed, some detail that didn't make sense before." Morrison nodded. "Fresh eyes can reveal connections we missed." Sarah wiped her muddy hands on her jeans, her voice barely a whisper. "The files are at my house." Mark gave a soft nod. "Then I'll follow you. We'll go through it together." And together, for the first time in years, they walked away from the swamp, carrying the weight of a truth they'd hoped they'd never have to face. They walked back to their vehicles in silence, the only sound coming from the squelch of boots in the muddy earth. Mark stayed close to Sarah, steadying her with a hand on her back as she carefully navigated the uneven terrain. Behind them, the forensics team resumed their grim, meticulous work, cataloging, photographing, and preserving every unsettling fragment unearthed from the swamp. Sarah sat in her car with her hands gripping the steering wheel, unmoving for several long minutes. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, where she watched Mark climb into his pickup. The world outside the glass felt surreal, fogged in grief, blurred by disbelief. Somehow, without remembering the road or the turns, she found herself pulling into her own driveway, the familiar ranch-style house unchanged since the day Emma vanished from the backyard. Inside, the air felt thick and unmoving, like the walls had trapped time itself. Every corner of the home breathed Emma. Her colorful drawings still clung to the refrigerator under faded magnets. Her height, marked in careful pencil lines along the kitchen door frame, stopped at 6 years and never moved again. Even her favorite cereal box sat untouched in the pantry. Sarah could never bring herself to throw it away. "I'll make coffee," Mark offered gently, stepping into the kitchen like he'd never left. Like the 3 years of divorce hadn't built quiet walls between them. He moved with a familiarity that made Sarah ache. She pulled the manila folder from the drawer with mechanical hands and laid it out across the dining room table. Police reports, timelines, maps, photos. Every desperate clue, every lead that had dissolved into nothing, spread before them in orderly rows. Mark returned with 2 mugs, setting, one near her trembling hand. Neither spoke for a moment. September 15th, 1998. He read aloud from the first report, though they both knew every word by heart. Sarah nodded faintly. She was playing in the backyard. I was doing laundry. I checked every 10 to 15 minutes. She had her dolls. They were having a tea party by the swing set. Then at 3:30, you went to check again, and she was gone, Mark said, his voice tightening. The back gate was open. I latched it. I always latched it. Her eyes stung. Mark reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Nobody's blaming you, Sarah. Whoever did this, they were watching. They knew when to act. He pulled out the copy of his own alibi. I was at the hardware store the whole afternoon. 3 employees vouched for me. The security cameras showed me on the register until nearly 6. Sarah didn't respond. Her eyes lingered on the photos of Emma, her bright eyes, that toothy smile, the gap where her 2 front teeth had been. She had her whole life ahead of her in those pictures. Mark picked up one photo. Emma, beaming in her red velvet birthday dress, chocolate frosting smeared across her cheek. She loved that dress, he whispered. Tried to wear it to the grocery store, remember? I had to hide it sometimes just to wash it. Sarah's breath caught. Whoever took her? They must have been watching us for a long time. They knew our patterns. When I'd be distracted, when the neighborhood was quiet. I've been thinking the same thing, Mark said, his voice heavy. They knew too much. Maybe now, with what they found in the swamp, we can finally see a pattern we missed. They sat in silence, surrounded by pages they had once read so many times they could recite them. But now those same pages held a new, grim weight. After a while, Mark stood to give her space. His departure was quiet, the way grief always left, unannounced, but never really gone. Alone, Sarah tried to force herself to re-examine the files, to find clarity in paperwork, but her mind refused to let go of the image burned into her thoughts. The red oven, sitting like a grotesque shrine on that blue tarp. Something about it wouldn't let her rest. The style, the color. It was more than the horror. It was familiarity. She picked up her phone and dialed Morrison's direct line. He answered on the second ring. Detective, it's Sarah. I need to ask you something about the oven. Of course. What do you need to know? Could you send me close-up photos? Something about it feels familiar. I know that sounds strange. I just need to see it again. There was a pause on the line. I can send over the preliminary shots from the scene. Give me 10 minutes. Sarah powered on her old Dell laptop, the fan wheezing to life. While waiting, she cleared the dining table of case notes, making room. When the email notification dinged, she opened the message and clicked on the attachments. The oven filled her screen in startling detail. The red enamel was still vibrant despite the rust, rich, glossy, somewhere between burgundy and candy apple. Chrome handles gleamed through the dirt, styled with elegant 1960s curves. She zoomed in on a nameplate, Westinghouse. The model number was partially obscured by corrosion. She printed the photos and examined them under the kitchen light. The colors slightly faded but recognizable. That red, it tugged at something buried deep in memory. Driven by instinct, she grabbed her purse and the photos. In Pine Ridge, a few vintage appliance shops lined the historic district. Her first stop was Modern Appliance. A young clerk looked at the photo and offered a polite shrug. Way before my time, ma'am. Maybe try Retro Kitchen on Oak. At Retro Kitchen, the owner, an expert in mid-century decor, recognized the era, but not the model. Definitely 1960s, she said. That color was hot for a few years. Try Harold over at Handy's Repair. He knows everything. Handy's was a relic. The bell above the door chimed, releasing the scent of metal and motor oil into the air. Behind the counter, an elderly man with thick glasses glanced up from a disassembled mixer. "Can I help you?" Sarah stepped forward, photos in hand. "I was hoping you could tell me about this oven." Harold wiped his hands and held the images under his workbench light. His brows lifted. "Well, That's a '64 Westinghouse Gourmet series. They only made that red, candy apple deluxe, from '64 to '67. You don't see many anymore." "Do you remember selling one?" He nodded slowly. "Funny you ask. I did sell one just like that. Maybe 3.5 years ago. It stuck in my head. People don't come asking for ovens like that every day." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Do you remember when exactly?" Harold turned to a wall of ledgers. His fingers slid along spines before stopping. "April 18th, 1998. Cash sale, $450. No name." Sarah's knees weakened. 5 months before Emma disappeared. "Do you remember who bought it?" "Middle-aged man. Brown hair. Nothing flashy, but real specific. Had to be that model, that color. Asked weird questions about the seal, internal heat retention, measurements. Most folks buy for looks. He was different." Sarah snapped a photo of the ledger with her phone. "Thank you, Harold. This is incredibly helpful." Harold returned to his tools, concern etched across his face. "I hope it brings you closer to the truth." In the driver's seat of her car, hands shaking, Sarah called Morrison immediately. She recounted the entire conversation. He listened carefully. "Interesting timing," he said finally. "But Sarah, thousands of people own vintage ovens. This could just be coincidence." But deep inside, Sarah knew. Coincidence didn't seal an oven door shut with industrial adhesive. Coincidence didn't watch her for months. Coincidence didn't bury her daughter. This was something else. And now she had a lead. Sarah's voice cracked slightly, her frustration slipping through. "Someone asked about heat retention and door seals. That can't just be nothing." "I'm not dismissing it," Detective Morrison replied calmly. "We'll add it to the case file, cross-reference appliance sales with the suspect lists. But without a name or description, it's not enough." Sarah knew he was right, logically, but logic didn't quiet the storm inside her. The timing gnawed at her. Someone had specifically purchased that model of oven, an obscure candy apple red 1964 Westinghouse, just 5 months before Emma disappeared. Someone who asked technical questions about sealing and heat. Questions that had nothing to do with aesthetics and everything to do with containment. The implications made her stomach twist into knots. Later that afternoon, she sat in the kitchen again, staring at the photos of the old ledger entry on her phone. April 18th, 1998. A date that pulsed with ominous meaning. The kind of date that wedged itself into your mind and wouldn't leave. She knew Mark needed to hear this. Whatever tensions remained between them, he was Emma's father, and deserved to know. She picked up her phone and dialed. It rang 3 times before he answered. "Hello?" Mark's voice was slightly out of breath, like he'd been running. "It's me," Sarah said quickly. "I'm sorry to bother you." "No, it's fine. Are you okay? Did something happen?" "I went to a few appliance stores earlier today. Showed them the oven photos," she began, gripping the phone tighter. One owner remembered selling that exact model, April 1998, 5 months before Emma vanished. There was a long pause, the sound of Mark adjusting the phone, his breath audible in the background. "April 1998, that's quite a coincidence," he said slowly. "That's what I thought too, and this man, the buyer, paid in cash, asked strange, specific questions about the oven, temperature control, heat retention, door sealing." Mark's voice softened, but there was something hesitant behind it. "Sarah, you know as well as I do, vintage appliances were getting trendy back then. All that retro chic design stuff. Dozens of people could have bought similar ovens." Something in his tone made her pause. It wasn't disbelief. It was distance. He sounded like he wasn't fully present. She frowned. "Where are you? You sound like you're underground." "I'm at the cabin," he answered after a beat. "The one up at Deer Lake. I needed to get away from town for a while, clear my head." Sarah stiffened. "The cabin? I thought you sold that during the divorce." "I was going to," Mark said quickly. "Had it listed and everything, but I couldn't go through with it. Too many memories, you know. Emma learning to swim off the dock, us roasting marshmallows out back, thunderstorms in the loft." Sarah was quiet. She remembered the cabin too. Remembered the fights they had over it during the split, the temporary truce when he promised to sell. She remembered the peace of finally believing she wouldn't have to revisit that part of their shared past. Then Mark's voice shifted, grew lighter, almost hopeful. "Why don't you come up?" he said. "I know today's been awful, and maybe you shouldn't be alone right now. We could talk more. About the oven, about Emma, about everything. We're both grieving the same loss, and maybe we shouldn't be doing it separately." Sarah hesitated, eyes sweeping over the kitchen, the half-finished case files, the haunting silence of the house. Being alone hadn't brought her peace. It had only magnified the ache. Maybe he was right. "Okay," she said, the word escaping before she could stop it. "If it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Mark said quickly. "I'll be there in 45 minutes. We'll figure this out, Sarah. We'll find the truth about what happened to our little girl." After hanging up, Sarah walked slowly into Emma's bedroom, the space frozen in time. The unicorn comforter was still perfectly tucked in, the stuffed animals in their usual line along the pillow. Crayon drawings still clung to the pink walls. She sat on the bed, lifting Emma's worn teddy bear and pressing it to her chest. It still smelled faintly of her daughter. The cabin, she hadn't thought about it in years. They bought it the year Emma was born, a rustic escape from Mark's growing business empire. For a while, those weekends had been golden. Mark would relax, build fairy houses with Emma in the woods, teach her to fish with the patience of a saint. But as time passed, the cabin became less of a refuge and more of a forgotten promise. Work always came first. She remembered one weekend in particular, Emma sitting at the door, her tiny suitcase packed, waiting for a trip that never came. "Next weekend, Princess," Mark had said, but next weekend never arrived. The final fracture came at Emma's 5th birthday. Mark had promised to leave work early. Instead, he showed up after everyone had gone. Emma was asleep on the couch, her dress wrinkled, her cheeks still stained with tears. "Why doesn't Daddy love me?" she'd asked earlier. Sarah hadn't had the words then. She still didn't. The horn honked outside. She looked out through Emma's window and saw Mark's truck in the driveway. She put the teddy bear back, grabbed her purse, and locked the door behind her. Mark stepped out and opened the passenger door for her, a small, familiar gesture that once meant something. He looked tired, older, worn in ways that went beyond the day's events. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. "I know we're not what we used to be, but today, we need to be Emma's parents first." Sarah nodded and buckled in. As they pulled out of the driveway, she noticed the way his hands gripped the wheel, tight, white-knuckled, like the strain of the day hadn't left him. The inside of the truck smelled like pine air freshener and coffee. But there was something else, too, a faint chemical odor she couldn't quite place. Mark flicked the radio on, settling on a classic rock station. The music filled the silence. "The cabin's in decent shape," he offered. "I've been fixing it up on weekends. Helps me think. Working with my hands and all." Sarah stared out the window as Pine Ridge faded behind them, the winding roads ahead pulling them deeper into the forest. Tall trees flanked either side of the truck, their branches weaving into a canopy that dimmed the waning light. "Remember the first time we brought Emma up here?" Mark said, voice soft. "She was 3, kept asking if bears lived in the trees." Despite everything, Sarah smiled. She made you check under the cabin with a flashlight. Mark laughed, the sound warm and fleeting. Then she decided if there were bears, she wanted to be their friend. As they drove, the memories began to flow more freely. Mark told her about the time Emma caught her first sunfish and insisted they take 50 pictures. Sarah added she wanted to keep it as a pet. Mark chuckled. Princess Bubbles III, because apparently there were 2 other fish royalty we never knew about. For a while, they were just 2 grieving parents, remembering a girl who once made their world brighter. They passed familiar landmarks, the ranger station, the trail where Emma collected pine cones, the wooden bridge where they played poo sticks. "I'm glad you kept the cabin," Sarah said softly. "I know I was angry during the divorce, but these memories, they matter." Mark glanced over at her, a shadow flickering across his expression. Something unreadable, caught between grief and longing. "It's the only place that still feels like she's alive," he murmured. "Like if I just wait long enough, she'll come bursting through the door with a jar of salamanders, shouting for me to look." As they turned off the main road onto the narrow gravel path that led to the cabin, Sarah's chest tightened. Anticipation and dread mixed in her ribs like 2 fists pushing against each other. When the headlights swept over the A-frame tucked beneath the towering pines, her breath caught. It looked different. The wraparound deck had been recently restained. New windows gleamed beneath the soft porch light. Empty flower boxes, neatly fastened to the railings, awaited spring. "You've really kept it up," she said, surprised. Mark gave a quick nod as he parked beside the cabin. "Started with small repairs, then it turned into a whole project. New roof last fall, redid the kitchen, gave me something to focus on when everything else felt—" He trailed off, lost in the space between words. Inside, the scent of pine wood mingled with lemon cleaning product. Mark flipped on the lights, revealing a space that was simultaneously familiar and strange. The same couch they'd collapsed onto after long hikes, the rustic table he'd built by hand. But everything looked freshly scrubbed, organized with purpose, as if the cabin had become more than just a retreat, almost a shrine. "Make yourself at home," Mark said over his shoulder as he moved to the kitchen. "Steaks, okay?" "Sure," Sarah replied softly, already drifting through the space. Her fingertips grazed the bookshelf. Emma's bedtime stories still lined the lower shelves. Goodnight Moon, The Velveteen Rabbit, Where the Wild Things Are. Beside the fireplace hung Emma's child-sized fishing rod and bright orange life vest. Sarah's chest tightened. On the walls, familiar photos captured golden moments. Emma's toothy grin beside the lake, her first campfire marshmallow. Their little family glowing under a summer sunset. But there were others now, newer. Photos of Emma Sarah hadn't seen since the divorce. Ones Mark must have copied and framed, perhaps clinging to a time that had long since fractured. "The bathroom's still where it's always been," Mark called. "But I upgraded the fixtures." Sarah stepped down the short hallway, passing the framed photo of Emma playing in the rain, her arms wide like she could catch the sky. The bathroom was clean, tastefully updated. Modern tile, new lighting. But the old clawfoot tub remained. The one Emma used to pretend was her pirate ship. After splashing cold water on her face, Sarah noticed a door slightly ajar just past the bathroom. The garage. Curiosity led her to peek in, expecting paint cans and old fishing gear. Instead, what she saw made her blood run cold. The garage smelled of motor oil and sawdust, nothing unusual. But her gaze landed on a large cardboard box in the far corner. Westinghouse, bold, unmistakable print across the front. Her legs weakened. She approached it slowly, her heart pounding, breath quickening. The model number printed along the side read, GS 1964. Her vision swam. That was the model, the same as the oven from the swamp, the one that had held her daughter's remains. But this box was pristine, new, crisp corners, no mold, no yellowing. It hadn't been purchased 3 years ago. This was recent. Her knees buckled. She reached out to the workbench for balance, knocking over a line of screwdrivers and a crash of metal. "Sarah?" Mark's voice rang out. He appeared in the doorway within seconds, his expression immediately shifting to concern. She could only point at the box, her hand trembling. Her voice caught in her throat. "That oven. That box. That model." Mark's face shifted as he registered what she was seeing. "Oh, God! Oh, Jesus!" he said, rushing to her side. He guided her down onto a plastic crate. "I'm so sorry. I should have moved that. After this morning. Of course it would freak you out." Sarah tried to speak, to breathe, but panic was clawing at her lungs. Her words came in fragments. "It's the same model. Why do you have that?" Mark knelt in front of her, gripping her hands gently, his voice low and urgent. "My oven broke last month," he said. "The one here. It's ancient. This was the only model that fits. I didn't even think about the connection. I haven't installed it yet." He looked genuinely shaken. His thumb traced soothing circles across her knuckles. "I swear to you, Sarah, I wasn't trying to scare you." She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the spiral in her brain. Coincidence. It had to be. Her mind was raw from grief, building connections where none existed. And yet, her breath finally steadied. She opened her eyes and noticed something else. Against the far wall, stacked in neat towers, sat case after case of beer, Coors. At least a dozen six-packs. She gestured weakly. "Planning a party?" Mark followed her gaze, then chuckled, the sound brittle. "Fishing buddies coming next weekend. Probably overdid it. You know how guys are." He helped her to her feet, keeping a firm but gentle arm around her. "Let's get you back inside. You need rest. Today's been too much." Back in the cabin, he wrapped her in a blanket, brought her a glass of water, and sat beside her on the couch. There was a tenderness in his gestures, a flicker of the man she once loved. "Rest," he whispered. "Dinner will be ready soon." Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah picked at her steak, unable to taste anything. Mark, on the other hand, had already downed his second beer before she'd finished 2 bites. The table between them felt less like the site of family dinners and more like a wall, unspoken history stacked like bricks. "We should talk about what happens next," she offered gently. "Morrison said DNA results in 72 hours, but we could start sooner. Maybe hire someone private to dig into that oven lead. Track more sales, anything that gets us closer to—" Mark cut her off. "You know what I can't stop thinking about?" he said, draining his beer and immediately cracking open another. "How damn hard I worked. 60, 70 hours a week building a life for us." Sarah's heart sank. "Mark, this isn't the time." "For what?" he snapped, opening his third beer. "So you could leave the second things got tough?" Her fork clinked against her plate. "Things were tough for years, Mark. You were never home. Emma barely—" "I was providing, damn it," he shouted, then reined himself in, breathing heavily. "But it wasn't enough for you, was it?" Sarah stayed quiet. 6 months, Mark slurred, leaning forward. 6 months after the divorce, and you were already dating. She set down her water slowly. "We were separated for over a year. The marriage was long over before the papers were signed. Still married in God's eyes," he snapped. "In Emma's." He locked eyes with her. "I saw you, at Romano's, with him, laughing like none of it ever happened, like Emma never existed." A chill crept up her spine. "You were watching me." "I just happened to be driving by," he said, but his eyes darted away. "February 14th. You wore that blue dress, the one I bought you." Sarah's stomach turned. The detail was too precise. Her voice dropped. "Mark, have you been following me?" He didn't answer, just kept drinking. "You looked happy," he murmured. "Too happy." She stood abruptly. "I need to call Morrison, let him know where I am, maybe there's an update." But her phone showed no signal. Of course, too deep in the mountains. "What about a landline?" she asked, her voice tight. Disconnected it, Mark replied. No one to call. Too expensive. Her pulse quickened. No cell service, no phone, no way out but his truck. She moved toward the front door, forcing her voice to sound casual. Just stretching my legs. Mark's voice cut through the room like a blade. Sit down. It wasn't a suggestion. She froze, then turned back slowly and sat, her mind racing. Mark's eyes were red now, his fourth or fifth beer half gone. Emma was the only good thing I ever did. My perfect girl, and you took her away. The divorce had nothing to do with Emma, Sarah said carefully. Mark gave a cold laugh. You think you understand cause and effect? One domino falls, they all fall. He stood suddenly, weaving slightly. I'm getting another drink. The moment he disappeared into the kitchen, Sarah bolted. She made it 3 steps toward the door before Mark intercepted her, quicker than his drunken state should have allowed. Going somewhere? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I want to go home, she said, steadying her voice. You're drunk, and you're scaring me. Scaring you? Mark laughed, a low, bitter sound that sent chills down Sarah's spine. You want to know what's really scary, Sarah? Watching your ex-wife replace you like you never existed. Watching her laugh in candlelight while your daughter sits home asking why mommy doesn't love us anymore. Mark, let me leave, Sarah said urgently, trying to step around him. But he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her skin. You want to talk about coincidences? He said, voice dropping. The mask, the man she once knew, slipped away entirely, and what emerged beneath wasn't anger. It was cold, controlled, calculating. That oven in the garage, he said, his voice disturbingly calm. I bought it last month, to replace the one I put Emma in. The words didn't compute. Sarah's mind flailed against their meaning. Number he couldn't mean. I had to, Mark continued, his grip tightening like a vice. There was an empty space in the kitchen. Someone might notice. Ask questions. Why's there a gap, Mark? Where's the oven? No. The word barely escaped her lips. No. You saw the work logs, the security footage. I was at the store when she disappeared, Mark said, almost gently. But she didn't disappear, Sarah. Not really. I brought her home. Right here. I kept her downstairs for 3 years while you were out dating, starting over, forgetting us. Sarah's legs buckled, but Mark held her upright like a puppet, forcing her to hear every word. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. You're lying, she whispered, voice raw and desperate. You're drunk. You're confused. You're lying. She was here, Mark said, his voice shaking with twisted emotion. In the basement, right below us, while you filed for divorce, while you redecorated her room and went on dates with that smiling bastard. Sarah opened her mouth to scream, but he clamped his hand over it. She bit down hard, tasted blood. He grunted but didn't let go. Then he dragged her, across the kitchen, to the basement door. Time you saw where your daughter really lived, he spat, yanking the door open. While you were playing happy families upstairs. He shoved her hard. She fell, tumbling down wooden steps. Pain exploded in her hip, her elbow, her side as she landed with a thud on the cold cement floor below. For a moment, everything was still. Dim light from a single bulb revealed the space. Small, almost sterile. Sarah blinked through tears and agony, the room swimming into focus. To her left, a tiny, pink-painted room. Maybe 10 by 12 feet, concrete walls, but decorated with princess decals now peeling with age. A child-sized cot sat against the wall, draped in faded Disney sheets. On the floor, early reader books, math workbooks, colored pencils. A shelf lined with dolls and handmade dresses, crayons sorted by hue. A keyboard, art projects, toys, a child's world. Her body trembled, but her heart shattered. Emma had lived here. Her baby had been alive, beneath her feet. For 3 years. Mark descended behind her, slowly, holding the railing. Despite the alcohol, he moved with intention, his large frame sealing off the stairs. "Welcome to Emma's home away from home," he said with a sick smile. 3 years, Sarah, right under your nose." Sarah crawled backward, her limbs failing her. "You were at work," she stammered. "The cameras, you had an alibi." Mark nodded casually, leaning against the concrete wall. "I was at work, at 3:30, but they don't show my lunch break. Noon, drove straight here, waited in the garage. I knew your routine better than you did. Laundry after lunch, 30 minutes minimum, plenty of time." Her vision blurred. This was the man who had once read to Emma at bedtime, held her in the hospital room the day she was born. "I started planning the day you filed the divorce papers," he said, as if confessing some great architectural blueprint. "Told you I was working on the cabin. Spent every weekend down here, soundproofing, installing air vents, stockpiling books." She thought it was a playroom surprise. His hand swept over the room like a twisted host. "The day I took her, I told her you didn't want us anymore, that you'd picked someone else. She cried for weeks, but I told her this was our new life. She'd adjust." "You're a monster," Sarah whispered, barely able to hear her own voice over her racing pulse. "I'm a father," he shouted, then steadied himself. "The kind of father you always said I wasn't. I homeschooled her, fed her, kept her safe, structured days, breakfast at 8, lessons until noon, then lunch, playtime. I did everything you said I was incapable of." "You kidnapped her," Sarah said, voice cracking. "You caged her." "I saved her," Mark snapped, "from a broken home." Sarah scanned the room and saw it. On the wall, a child's crayon calendar. Hundreds of days marked off in uneven lines. 3 years of waiting. "She never stopped asking about you," he said. "Every day. 'When can I see Mommy? Mommy wouldn't do this. Mommy's looking for me.' Even down here she loved you more. Always more." His voice broke. "She started getting clever, trying to hide when I came down, trying to run. By 9, she was too smart, too strong." He stumbled to the mini-fridge in the corner and cracked open another beer. "His 7th? 8th? She told me she'd hurt herself if I didn't let her go. Told me she hated me. Told me you'd find her. That I'd go to jail." Sarah's stomach turned. Her hands searched the floor blindly for anything. A pipe, a rock, a shard. Anything. "I always knew how it'd have to end," Mark said softly, a strange peace settling into his drunken face. "Part of me hoped, but I knew." "What did you do?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Mark stared ahead, his eyes distant, as if he were reliving it in real time. "It was a Thursday. She'd been screaming all week, throwing things, spitting. I'd been drinking more. Just stress, you know?" He looked to Sarah like he expected her to understand. "That morning, she looked at me, so calm, and said, 'I hate you. Mommy will find me. You'll go to jail forever.'" His voice cracked again, and I knew. I had to stop her from hurting herself. Had to stop the spiral. His hand tightened around the beer can, crumpling the aluminum. Sarah felt it then. The air shifted. The moment when a terrible secret goes from unspeakable to confessed. Mark took a long, trembling pull from his beer. His hand shook, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I made her favorite juice, apple with just a splash of grape. She always said it tasted like candy." Sarah could hardly breathe. "I put the sedatives in it," he continued, his voice deadened and flat. "Enough to make her sleepy. She drank it during lunch. Started getting drowsy during story time." Sarah's nails dug into her palms, fists clenched so tightly they drew blood. "I told her there were monsters outside, bad people. I said she had to hide in the special hiding place, the oven." Sarah broke. "Stop," she sobbed. "Please, stop." But Mark kept going, relentless, unfeeling. "She was so sleepy, so trusting, even then. She climbed right in, with her stuffed rabbit." Sarah dropped to her knees, retching, the weight of her daughter's final moments too much to carry. "I turned the heat up slowly," Mark said, emotionless. "Put a chair against the door in case she woke up. But she didn't. The sedatives, carbon monoxide, got her before the heat ever could. Sarah screamed into the silence, her voice raw with grief. I kept her there for hours. Just to be sure, he said with clinical detachment. Then I sealed it with adhesive, drove it out to the swamp, picked the deepest part I could find, cleaned the kitchen, installed the new oven I bought in April. Perfect crime. He took another swig. Except for you. Sarah gasped through her sobs. You wanted me to suffer. Mark turned slowly toward her, eyes glazed and hollow. I needed you to suffer. The way I did. Watching you sit in Romano's, smiling across the table like I never existed. Our table. While our daughter was locked under this roof, wondering why Mommy never came. He turned away, heading for the stack of beer cases in the corner. And that's when Sarah saw it. A hammer, resting on the edge of the workbench, close, within reach. Her body moved before her mind caught up, driven by something deeper than fear. Survival. Rage. She lunged. The hammer felt solid, final in her hand. She swung. The sound was sickening. Metal against bone, cracking through the thick silence. Mark dropped instantly. The beer bottle shattered. Foam mixing with blood pooling beneath his skull. She didn't check if he was breathing. She didn't care. She climbed over his body, her breath ragged, her body shaking with adrenaline. His keys were on the kitchen counter. She grabbed them with trembling hands, burst through the door, and into the cold night. The truck roared to life. She threw it into reverse, gravel kicking up as she spun down the narrow dirt road, branches clawing at the windows. Her only thought, get out, get away, get help. 10 minutes down the mountain, her phone buzzed. 1 bar. Enough. It took 3 tries to dial 911, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely hit the right buttons. 911, what's your emergency? This is Sarah Whitmore, she gasped. I'm on Mountain Road near Deer Lake. My ex-husband just confessed to murdering our daughter, Emma. He kept her in his basement for 3 years. He's at the cabin, 2847 Deer Lake Road. I hit him with a hammer. I don't know if he's alive. Please, send help, please. Ma'am, slow down. Are you safe right now? I'm in his truck, on the side of the road. He killed my baby. He locked her in the basement. He put her in an oven. And then she broke. She couldn't say another word. We're dispatching units to both locations now. Stay on the line. Through her sobs, Sarah gave the dispatcher everything. His confession, the basement prison, the location. And then she waited, alone in the dark, for justice, for closure. Police reached the cabin within 20 minutes. They found Mark unconscious, a severe head wound bleeding across the basement floor. Paramedics worked quickly. Crime scene techs began cataloging the unimaginable. The pink concrete walls, the small cot, the drawings. The calendar with nearly 1,100 days crossed off in crayon. Back at the Pine Ridge Police Department, Sarah sat in an interview room, wrapped in a blanket someone had handed her. She couldn't stop shaking. Detective Morrison sat across from her, weariness in every line of his face. Take your time, he said softly. I know this is unbearable, but we need it, all of it. And so she did. She told him about the dinner, the drinking, the basement, the truth she never imagined possible. She spoke through choked tears, through pain that seemed to split her open. He said, she was down there the whole time, Sarah whispered. While I begged for help, while I put up posters, she was right there. Through the window behind Morrison, she could see officers moving with purpose. Evidence bags, case files, lives unraveling in folders. I need to step out, Morrison said gently. Mark's conscious, talking. I'll update you. Alone again, Sarah stared at her hands. The same hands that had pushed Emma on a swing, braided her hair, kissed her boo-boos. The same hands that had held a hammer. An hour later, Morrison returned, his face grave. He's confessed everything. We've got it on tape." He opened his notebook, the pages shaking slightly in his hands. "He started drinking heavily when your marriage began deteriorating. Used alcohol to cope with what he called your constant criticism. After the divorce, it got worse. 12 packs a day. We found journals. He was stalking you. Photos, records, your schedule." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "He said he saw me at Romano's. Valentine's Day, 1999. You were there with David Carlson. He wrote 10 pages about it, called it the moment of betrayal." Morrison paused. "That's when he decided you needed to be punished." He explained how Mark had planned everything, how he built the room, soundproofed it, installed outside locks, how he used his visitation weekends to gain Emma's trust, told her he was working on a surprise, how he took her when you did laundry, knowing you'd be distracted. "She went with him willingly," Sarah whispered. "She trusted him." He nodded. "And then he told her you didn't want her anymore, that you'd started a new life. He kept her in that basement for exactly 3 years, taught her, controlled every aspect of her world." Morrison's voice cracked. "And then she got too strong, too smart, too defiant." He paused again. "She started threatening to hurt herself. That's when he made the juice." Sarah sobbed. "Apple with grape, her favorite." The medical examiner confirmed it. Carbon monoxide poisoning, accelerated by sedatives. She didn't wake up. She didn't suffer. That's the only mercy in this. He showed her photos of his computer searches, how to dispose of bodies, how to maximize emotional trauma, how to build an airtight chamber. "He chose the oven for a reason," Morrison said. "He wanted you to imagine her final moments. He wanted you to suffer." "What charges?" Sarah asked. "Kidnapping, false imprisonment, first-degree murder. He'll never leave prison." Morrison exhaled deeply. He's showing no remorse, just tears for himself, rage over his plan failing. He reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. "I'm so sorry we didn't find her. We failed her, all of us." Sarah stared ahead, her voice hollow. 3 years. She was alive, and I mourned her like she was gone. A knock came at the door. "Detective," an officer said. "Media's gathering outside. They're asking for a statement." Sarah stood slowly. "I'll speak to them. People need to know that the monster isn't always a stranger." Before cameras, flanked by Detective Morrison, Sarah spoke clearly. She spoke not just for Emma, but for every missing child, for every parent who never stopped searching, for every family still trapped in unknowing. Back inside, Morrison guided her to a quiet room, away from the chaos. "We'll get you help, support, legal, emotional, whatever you need. You're not alone anymore. And Mark will spend the rest of his life where he belongs." Sarah nodded. "Thank you. Do you have someone who can stay with you?" "My sister. She's on her way from Portland." "Good. You shouldn't be alone." When the door closed, Sarah sat in silence, alone for the first time in days. Her baby, her little girl, had been alive. She buried her face in her hands and wept, not just for the horror, but for every birthday missed, every crayon drawing she never saw, every bedtime story left unread. "Emma, baby girl," she whispered through her tears. "I'm so sorry. I didn't find you. I didn't know. But I swear to you, I'll make sure he pays. I'll fight. I'll carry you with me. Not how you died, but how you lived. Your smile, your laugh, the way you believed in magic." The walls held her promise. The air held her grief. Outside, justice rolled forward. Inside, Sarah Whitmore sat in stillness, her heart broken, but her purpose clear. She would remember, she would speak, and she would never let the world forget Emma.